There we are. Okay. I cannot see yourself because the host muted you. Okay.
Well, we can hear you.
Okay.
Peter, we can hear you loud and clear.
All right.
Go ahead and get it kicked off if you're ready. You tell us when.
Ready. I am ready. All right. Am I live?
You are live, and I am excited. My name is Margaret White. I'm the executive director of No Labels.
I know who you are, Margaret, and I'm delighted to meet you. And I am going to be singing for you all now. This is a song that was written in 1970, but it is as current as the day is long, because it asserts that we are one. And in the days of the 1970s, it meant one thing. And now, my friends, it's even more critical for us to realize how much we need each other and to be with each other and to converse and to be close and to eradicate the distinctions that make us falsely not believe that we are of good intent and spirit, and we must unite. And this is a song that mentions it far more poetically than I would have done so in this introduction. I travel the banks of the river of Jordan to find where it flows to the sea. I looked in the eyes of the cold and the hungry, and I saw that I was looking at me. I wanted to know if life had a purpose and what it all means in the end. In the silence, I listened to voices inside me, and they told me again and again that there is only one river, there is only one sea. The river flows through you, my friends, and it flows through me. There is only one people, we are one and the same. We are all one spirit, we are all one name, we're one name. We are the Father, Mother, daughter, and son, from the dawn of creation. We are one, we are one, we are one, we are, you have to clap your hands. We are one, we are one, we are one, we are one, we are one. Okay, you can stop clapping to the next chorus. I see you clapping. Every blade of grass on the mountain, every drop in the sea, every cry of a newborn baby, every prayer to be free, every hope at the end of a rainbow, every song is part of the family of woman and man, and that means everyone. We are only one river, we are only one sea. I see you clapping now. The river flows through you, and it flows through me. If we're Democratic or Republican or whatever we are only one people. We are one and the same. We are all one spirit, my friends. We are all one name, one name, one name, one. We are the Father, Mother, daughter, and son. From the dawn of creation, we are one, we are one. We are one, 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 we are one. Applause. Thank you. So I'm honored. I'm honored to be on this call because this is the kind of call that will heal our nation, that will bring us together, that will let us learn to know that we disagree and agree on things, and we should. That's what democracy is about. But we cannot hate each other. We cannot demean each other. We embrace each other as human beings. Just like I don't agree with my kids on everything. But we talk and we figure it out. That's what we do. That's what a democracy does. That's what No Label does. So I am with you. And now I have to tell you that in this time, we need to forge from out of this crisis, which is a medical crisis and a crisis of humanity and confidence in each other and trust. We have to forge something. We have to take the falling rain, and turn it into sunshine. We have to weave me the sunshine out of the falling rain. Weave me the hope of a new tomorrow. Fill my cup again. I'm going to give you the words to learn. I want to see your mouths moving, even though I can't hear you. Weave me the sunshine out of the falling rain, out of the falling. I see you smiling. I do not see your lips moving. Dan, I want to see your lips moving. Weave me the sunshine out of the falling rain. Weave me the hope of a new tomorrow. Weave me the hope of a new tomorrow and fill my cup again. Bradley, I want to see it. Weave me out of the falling rain, out of the falling rain. Weave me the hope of a new tomorrow. Fill my cup again, fill my cup again. Thank you, Katie. Only you can climb that mountain, shine on me again. If you want to drink at the golden fountain, you're gonna shine on me again. Weave me out of the falling rain, out of the falling rain. Weave me the hope of a new tomorrow. Weave me the hope of a new tomorrow. Fill my cup again, weave me again. Weave me the sunshine out of the fall, and weave me the hope of a new tomorrow. Fill my cup again. They say that the tree of loving shine on me again. Grows on the bank of the river of suffering. Shine on me, shine on me again. Now do this. Take your arms and put them out and way out so that you're touching the next person. This is the closest you're going to get. Dan, I want to see you put your arms and touch the next person, and back and forth. Weave me the sunshine out of the falling. Margaret, I want to see your arms up there. I need you to do this avenue tomorrow. Fill my cup again, now. Weave me the sunshine out of the falling rain. Weave me the hope of a new tomorrow. Fill my cup again. Now, if you were to do that in real life, you would be doing something very, very unwise and foolish. But now we're doing it. If we're doing it like this, we can do it. And we can know that it is accepted, and we are not endangering each other's lives. I want to sing one more song. I want to sing it as an American who loves America. Yes, I know that there are a lot of you and I who have voted differently and disagreed over the years. But as it is with better angels, now called braver angels, where we have Republicans and Democrats rediscovering the fact of how much we have in common and how much we care about the same things. We have different ways to get there. And that we can work together. And we can not only work together, most importantly, we can care about each other. and honor each other and agree to disagree and compete and fight what we want, but not injure each other in any way. So I'm not going to injure anybody, and I don't want you to injure me, because we're going to sing a sacred song. It's like a national anthem in a way. It says, "This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forests to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I went walking the ribbon of highways, I saw above me the endless skyways, and I saw below me those golden valleys. This land was made for you and me. Now, you know, when I was in Ohio with Better Angels, and I was doing this gathering, Richard Lynch and I sang this song together. At the time, he's the head of the local Tea Party. People went, "Oh my God!" No, not "oh my God." "Oh, yes, my friend. Oh, we are together. Yes, I love this guy." And all the people that I met there, all the Republicans, Democrats, we are all one. I don't agree with them, but I love them. I do agree on a lot of things, though. That's what we found out. As I went walking, I saw a sign there, and on that sign it said, "No labels." That's where it pointed to where I want to go with my life now. I want to be together and not be labeled and told that I'm the good and believe things that don't worthwhile, and I care about others. I do for you and me. Here we go now. This land is your land. Come on, Dan, this is my land. I can see it. From California to the New York Island, from the redwood forest to the Gulf Stream of water. This land was made for you and me. I'm singing this land. This land was made for you and me. Yeah. I'm honored to be with all of you. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you so much, Dan. And where's my favorite person? Where's my favorite person? Who she disappeared? And where's my Jim Stannard? Where? Well, Katie, thank you. Alex, thank you. Bradley, thank you. Dan, thank you. And I know you're starting with your gathering now because it is 7 o'clock and I will be with you and I'm honoring you, and thank you for allowing me to be with you at this point.
Thank you, Peter, so much for that. It was wonderful, truly. Thank you, thank you. And now we will turn it over to our No Labels CEO, Nancy Jacobson, to welcome everyone officially to the call after this concert with Peter Yarrow. So Nancy, take us away.
Well, thank you, Peter. Really, this was so wonderful, and you really kicked us off right. And we just welcome everybody here with us tonight. to experience this next second Congress comes to you. And it's my pleasure to introduce Ryan Clancy, No Labels Chief Strategist. Ryan, where are you? To give everybody an understanding of who we are, what we do, and why it matters. Ryan Clancy, off to you. Should be with us. I saw him. He was there. He is there, Margaret.
Okay, here we go. Can everybody hear me now? You got me? Okay, great. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us. As Nancy mentioned, I just want to frame what we're doing here and who we are and what we do. And a lot of you know the basic idea of what No Labels is all about, which is we're Democrats, Republicans, independents, trying to bridge the divide between our parties. But I want to give you a little context for how we got here, because even though we've been doing these Zoom calls for about 6 weeks or so, we've actually been at this for about 10 years. And over the years, there have been a lot of reform groups in this space, all of whom started with the same proposition: our democracy was broken somehow. And a lot of them had different structural fixes, from reforming campaign finance rules or creating a third party or ending gerrymandering. And some people wondered why No Labels didn't focus on those same areas. And the simple answer was, we thought that while many of these fixes were laudable, that they would simply take too long to implement and that they didn't meet the urgency of our current political moment. What we did believe is that we desperately needed a robust bipartisan governing coalition in Washington, capable of solving problems and uniting during an acute national crisis. Well, unfortunately, that crisis is here in the form of the coronavirus pandemic. And America stands a much better chance of getting through it thanks to the trust and relationships that No Labels has forged among House members and Senate members, several of whom you're going to hear from tonight. We've developed an approach that is already working. Now, we just need more people across the country to get behind us. So we're very excited to have you with us, very excited for this conversation. And now I want to kick it over to one of our co-founders, Andy Bursky, to start our program.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank all of you for taking the time to be with us this evening. This is by no means a movement that is centered in Washington. This is a movement that is centered across the country and is embodied in citizens and leaders like yourselves who believe that there is a better way forward. So thank you for taking time to be with us. Tonight, we're going to have several of our most important leaders from Congress. Our two co-chairs of the Problem Solvers Caucus, Josh Gottheimer, a congressman from New Jersey, and Tom Reed, a congressman from New York State, as well as two of our Senate colleagues who have joined us through our bicameral sessions, Senator Bill Cassidy from Louisiana, Senator Susan Collins from Maine, and we also have Representative Susie Lee, who will be with us from Nevada. We have special regrets from two of our other senators who have been quite active with us, and unfortunately were not able to join us this evening. Senators Jackie Rosen from Nevada and Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia. Tonight's program is really going to be a discussion among our congressional leaders. We're going to open the floor up for questions. Because we have a large group, what we would ask is that if you have used Zoom before, you know there's a chat function. Go to the chat function and seek out Ryan Clancy. And if you could direct your questions to Ryan, we'll make sure that as many of them get asked as possible. With that, let me begin. Let me first take a quick roll call. I see Senator Cassidy. Hello, Senator. How are you?
Hey, Andy. How are you?
Great to see you. Thumbs up. Senator Susan Collins. Is Senator Collins here with us?
She is getting on. She was having a technical glitch, but she'll be on in 2 seconds.
Okay. Congressman Tom Reed.
That's not Tom Reed.
How about Congressman Josh Gottheimer?
Hello, how are you? Hey, Andy.
Hey, Josh, how
Hey,
are
everyone.
you?
How are you?
And Congressman Susie Lee. Susie, how are you?
Hi, everyone.
Thank you all for being with us. So why don't we begin, and Congressman Reed and Senator Collins will join us as they are able. Let me start off with a question, and perhaps you can all discuss it. You know, we all know, all of us on the phone know that in life, really everything is about relationships. In Congress, building relationships is harder than it might seem. Building relationships across the aisle, building relationships across the houses. Could you share with our citizen leaders what we're doing to address that, why it's so challenging, and what the benefits are from building these relationships as you've experienced it? Let me start with Congressman Gottheimer.
Thanks, Andy. And thank you all, by the way, for taking the time to join us tonight. And thanks to No Labels for bringing everyone together. Beyond grateful. It's good to see Bill and Susie, and I know Reed's joining in a second. But, you know, it's when you get to Congress, you know, and Susie is in her first term, I'm in my second term, and Bill was a member of the House before he graduated and, you know, to the higher chamber, and he still talks to us, so we're impressed. You know, when you get there, they send you off, that you have a orientation, and the orientation you do together. And so you show up and you're all freshmen, just like you do in college, and everyone comes together, and you go to the Kennedy School and to other places where they train you and, you know, had all the rules and procedures. And it's really a wonderful time where, you know, there's just great energy and excitement that you've gotten this new honor and responsibility. And then a couple weeks later, the first day happens, and it's almost like the bell goes off, like your high school bell. If you remember that, your first time you went in, when you were a freshman in high school, and the bell goes off, and everyone runs to their separate corners, and they never want you talking to the other side again. And the institution is built so that leadership on each respective side, Democrat or Republican, is really wants to do everything they can to keep you together on their team, right? Reds and blues instead of red, white, and blue. And as a result of that, you just don't, unless you actually take the time to develop your own relationships or have wonderful organizations like the Problem Solvers Caucus, which we, the members you're seeing here in the House of Representatives, have formed. You really, unless you do that, will never see people from the other side. And in fact, when you sit together on the House floor, you've got, even though there are no assigned seats on the House floor when you watch on TV, there's no assigned seats, but there's sides, Democrats and Republicans. And often you'll have members on one party that will literally never, ever go to the other side, even to the other side of the aisle, as they say, and actually go talk to your colleagues. So it's very difficult unless you actually put in the effort and do it yourself and build those relationships. But guess what? As you know, to pass legislation, you need to get something through, especially now in a divided government with the Senate being Republican and the House being Democrat, and of course the White House being Republican. If you don't have those relationships, if you don't build legislation that is bipartisan from the beginning, if it's purely partisan, either in the Senate and the House, the odds are very low that it'll actually become law. So the best way to do it is what we're doing, I believe, which is developing real relationships. We come together in the Problem Solvers Caucus every single week, at least during this very tough time in our country. We're on Zoom as a caucus 2 to 3 times a week, working together, figuring out where we can get things done together, where we can agree and where we disagree, and talking it through. And now, thanks to Senator Cassidy and so many other, Senator Collins, I know, who's coming on, has been wonderful, and so many others, and Senator Manchin and others who've really helped build a bicameral setting. And thanks to No Labels bringing us all together in one place, we now are doing that across not just the aisle in Congress, but across the Capitol to the other side, and building those relationships in the Senate as well. So it's really, and you build trust and relationships just like every other part of your life.
Thanks, Josh. It really is about trust. Let me turn to Senator Cassidy. Senator, maybe you can give a sense of that dynamic in the Senate, and then perhaps also comment about the rare situation where we're actually bringing senators and members of the House together to discuss policy matters. I think you're muted, Senator. There we go.
Thanks, Andy. Thank you all. Thanks for supporting No Labels. In one sense, I could just repeat what Josh said, but I'll give you a little bit more background. If you think about it, one thing I've been extremely concerned about is that instead of having 435 representatives and 100 senators who are all weighing in on public policy, more often this goes down to what we call the four corners, which is the Speaker of the House, the Minority Leader, Nancy and Kevin, and then the Leader of the Senate, and so Mitch and Chuck, the leader of the two parties. And that's because if you can't get agreement between the two chambers, the power flows to those four to broker a deal. And what typically happens, it's a big spending deal, and they will bring the spending deal, they delay it all the way up until the week before we go out for Christmas break. And the government's going to shut down if you don't pass it. And they give us the bill on a Monday. They don't allow any debate because they fill up the calendar with other things to do. And then we're supposed to vote on it Thursday, and if we don't, the government shuts down. This is the way our Congress has currently evolved to. And I think about why is that different than it formerly was. And people speak, my grandson's making an appearance. I'll be right with you, buddy. It used to not be that way. And people said, and I didn't know what to make of this, the reason it used to not be that way is that everybody lived in DC, they couldn't go home, and so they would actually fraternize, the kids would play ball together, the grandkids would play together, and so of course you build those relationships that allow those ties to bind. That has been lost. I come back almost every weekend, my wife's here, etc. So I think what No Labels is doing, to kind of give color to what Josh said, is allowing relationships to form organically, which can then, if you will, bypass the four corners. Bob Menendez and I are working on something to give funding to cities and states who've lost their tax base because of coronavirus, the economic shutdown. Josh and Tom Reed, speaking for No Labels, will bring that to the House. It'll automatically have a bipartisan imprimatur and a voting bloc to support it, so that even if there's some people on the wings of the left and the right, nonetheless, that group in the middle will be able to bring enough votes so that it would be able to pass should either leader decide to bring it to a vote. Now, that is a positive thing. That is an extremely positive thing. We have a little bit of a different dynamic on the Senate. We tend to work together across the aisle a little bit more, but since we need a 60 vote threshold, you still need to add 10 people, now roughly 7 people, but whichever party has to bring people from the other side on. There's still a party discipline which is attempted to be enforced. Susan Collins is about to speak. She's the most undisciplined Republican there is, routinely going her own way. Much to the chagrin, but much to the respect of everybody in the Senate. So anyway, that said, this bipartisan, bicameral relationship, replacing, if you will, the barbecues that formerly occurred, allows things to happen independently of that four corners dynamic. I think it has begun, it is going to grow, and it's growing because of this kind of relationship that Four Corners is fostering. So I'll pause there, Andy, but again, thanks everybody for being on, and thank my House of Representatives and my Senate colleagues for being on.
Thanks, Senator. Senator Collins, great to see you. I hope you're well. Thank you for joining us. We're just beginning and chatting about the what we're hoping will become the new normal, and how difficult it is, in fact, to establish relationships both across the aisle and between the houses. You've been a leader in bipartisan problem solving from the first day you showed up in the Senate, and you've earned the respect, I know, of your colleagues both in the Senate and throughout the House. But perhaps you can comment on why that is so challenging in this environment and what you see as the benefits of bringing this bicameral group together that we've been able to assemble to address key policy issues.
Well, first of all, thank you, Andy, for your personal leadership. And my thanks to my colleague, Bill Cassidy, for joining us tonight and for all of his good work in a bipartisan way in the Senate. The Senate and the House have really changed in the time that I've been privileged to serve there. And I attribute it to the rise of groups on the far left and the far right who demand 100% compliance with 100% of their views 100% of the time. And if you are bipartisan, the way that Tom Reed is, Josh Gottheimer, Bill Cassidy, so many of my colleagues who really believe in bipartisanship and a search for common ground, you face either a primary, a lot of money put against you. It's really changed. And I think Bill is right that part of it is that people used to stay in Washington more than we do now, and their families became friends. And as Tom Reed and I have discussed before, it's a lot harder to demonize someone with whom you've broken bread. And so that's why I see No Labels as playing such a vital role. You are for the middle. I have often urged you all to be radical moderates, which sounds like a contradiction in terms, but it really, truly is what we need nowadays. And there are other factors as well that have made it more difficult to work together. And I say this as someone who is ranked year after year after year as the most bipartisan member of the Senate by Georgetown University. And yet I find myself targeted, and I'm not trying to turn this into a political event, which it is not. But what that tells you is there's very little reward for trying to search out common ground nowadays. And I think that that is really unfortunate. We've become so balkanized as a country. And we talk about whether you're from a red state or a blue state or a purple state. Who cares? Let's just work together to try to adopt sensible policies. And that's why I'm very grateful for the work of No Labels and for the work of the Problem Solvers Caucus in the House, and those of us who have come together for the Common Sense Caucus, which is far less organized, I will admit, in the Senate, to try to find out where can we come together, and that comedy, collegiality, and compromise are not dirty words. So the way you get things done and the way you get the best policy. By listening to others on the other side of the aisle, as No Labels has repeatedly encouraged, that's how we get good policy. So I want to thank all of you who are listening and participating for giving us the support that we need, because I could tell you, as can my colleagues, it feels very lonesome out there when you try to forge bipartisan coalitions. There's not a lot of support for it. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator. The Problem Solvers Caucus has done really significant work on the issue that's on everyone's mind tonight, and will remain on our minds for quite some time. How do we get back to work, and how do we do it safely? And it has been, unsurprisingly, the central theme of the Problem Solvers Caucus's meetings and of the bicamerals. Congresswoman Lee, you are on, in many respects, the front lines of this, and as a Congress person from Nevada that has been just hurt as badly as any part of the country economically as the result of the crisis. Maybe you can comment on what you're seeing through the Problem Solvers Caucus in terms of our plan to move the country back to work out of the crisis, but to do it safely and thoughtfully, and how that applies in your home district.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you everyone for being on this call, and my colleagues, Tom and Josh. You've been incredible leaders for the Problem Solvers. This is the first caucus I joined when I came to Congress. I don't have a background in politics. I have a nonprofit background. So to me, it just made natural sense that I try to form relationships across the aisle to arrive at policies that most of Americans want anyway. And so, you know, the Problem Solvers, first of all, in Las Vegas, we are devastated by coronavirus. If you think about our major industry, gaming and casinos, hotels, tourism, 65% of our state budget is derived somehow directly or indirectly from gaming revenues. Our governor took a bold, difficult decision and shut down all non-essential businesses on March 17th. You know, looking 6 weeks out, it was really important that he did that. Our healthcare system was not overwhelmed. While we've seen an increase of cases, we're now seeing a plateau, and hopefully we'll start to see a decline in cases. But I think Nevada demonstrates just what's at stake when we talk about opening up the economy. Because this, you know, we have to frame this not just in what medical experts think, but it's what everyday Americans think. Because when, you know, we might have the governor say, it's fine, we're open for business, but you're only open for business and you're only going to survive in business if you get customers, if people feel confident showing up to your place of business. And to me, first of all, the devastation that we felt across this country, and I feel like a broken record on this, is because we have not had a national strategic plan when it comes to testing. And we still are way far behind. And I'm very concerned at what is coming out of this administration, basically saying it's up to all the states to do this, because we have, you know, production line issues, we have supply issues, but more importantly, we have just issues on just the scale of the type of testing that we need. And I'm right now just speaking about the swab testing. I'm not even talking about the serological testing. But you know, the Problem Solvers came together, like Josh had said, we meet several times a week in working groups. Thank goodness we changed the meeting time to not 6 a.m. Pacific time. We now have it at like noon, but we get together and we get to have these robust conversations about what's needed to open up the economy. And we produced a back to work plan. And the core of that plan is first and foremost protocols on not just, you know, how we respond to an infection, but how we prevent it and how we do that nationally. And secondly, and most importantly, is a robust national testing plan. You know, Congress in this last supplemental package put together, you know, supported $25 billion for testing. But it's not just throwing money at this plan. We need to have a national strategy. And I think that's been at the forefront of what we've talked about in No Labels. But it's also looking at how we're supporting our healthcare system, our frontline workers, our essential workers that are on the front line, and how we're supporting our education system. What are we going to do when our children go back to school? making sure that they have the adequate PPE, not just in the medical system, but for everyone who is going to be exposed, because it's going to, in my opinion, this is not a 3-month rebuild America. It is going to be a long, drawn out process. And I hope and I know that the problem solvers will be at the front lines in advocating for a robust, coordinated testing plan, because ultimately that's what we're going to need, not just to open up the economy, but to get the economy running again. It's not just, we're saying it's okay to go. People, this is not dictated by leaders. This is dictated by individuals not having fear that they're going to contract the virus or get ill. And so we have a lot of work to do nationally, but the plan that we put together and the problem solvers, to me, is just a basic framework that everyone should be following. And certainly it is being used as we start to negotiate the CARES 2.0 Act.
Thank you, Susie. The Problem Solvers Caucus has real clout. We have a loud and increasingly louder voice, 50 members, 25 R's and 25 D's, and a growing group of colleagues in the Senate, like Senator Collins and Senator Cassidy. Let me turn to the co-chair of the caucus, Tom Reed. Hi, Tom. How are you? Good to see you. You need to unmute yourself. And Susie teed this up well. We are focused on how we get back to work. The caucus has put a plan in place that has been signed off on by all of your members. Maybe you can describe for the folks who are with us this evening where some of the differences are between what we are recommending and what the White House is pursuing in terms of its back to work plan. And one of the questions that we are frequently asked by our citizen leaders is, how can they get involved? And so perhaps you and your colleagues and the senators can talk about a couple of the policy areas where you think the voice of citizens can have a real impact as we move forward here. Tom?
Well, thanks, Andy, and I apologize for being a little late getting on the call. I had to take care of another fire, and it seems like that's all we do right now as members is Zoom calls, constituent calls, and just taking care of not only healthcare issues with the virus, but also the economic devastation that's going off across the country. I'm from Western New York, not in New York City, not in the hot zone area, but we are in the middle of trying to reestablish and reopen some level of business here in our region. So, what I think the difference, to be perfectly honest with you, what we put together in our original proposal in the Problem Solvers Caucus with our health crisis, economic recovery crisis package we did around phase 2 timeframe, but also the back to work checklist that really is a substantive document that was the hard work of the caucus to come to consensus on the healthcare, economic recovery, and economic stimulus checklist. Pretty much the White House, and when we talk to Senate leaders and things of that nature, like Susan Collins and Bill Cassidy and others, we pretty much touched on really where that common ground is. And I think it shaped the proposals that are coming out of DC in regards to not only 3.5, but also in regards to what's going to be in phase 4, CARES Act 2, that type of thing. So this has kind of been shared with the White House leaders. This has been shared with the Senate leaders. This has been shared with the House leaders. And it's not because they're looking at our product per se. I think they are. But because of the collaboration of the 50 members, having those exchange of ideas back and forth and where we could come to consensus, where we could come to agreement, that product came after a week and a half of hard work as members doing exactly this, fine-tuning the product so that we could get to consensus. And so I think that's exactly the type of governing we want, in my opinion, going forward. And so what can stakeholders on the call do? Demand that your elected officials participate in this. We are 50 strong as a Problem Solvers Caucus in Washington, D.C. We always talk about, we joke, we want to replace ourselves and actually disband the Problem Solvers Caucus with a Problem Solvers Congress. That's what Congress should do. That's what it used to do. That's how we participated. That's how we legislated. We had a trusting respect for each other where you could have a true, honest disagreement, but also stay in the room to find that common ground. And so that type of leadership should be demanded by all of you in regards to what you should be doing and demanding of folks who represent you in Washington, D.C. You don't have to give up your ideology to be in this room. We have some of the most hard left and hard right members of the Problem Solvers Caucus who participate in our dialogue. The commonality of the leadership trait is they respect each other, they know who they are, and they're willing to challenge not only themselves, but their colleagues to answer the substantive problems before us. And the coronavirus situation is going to need that more than ever. And as we go into the phase 4 negotiations, and Susan and Bill talked about it, I'm very concerned that this top four in a room type of approach that's evolved in Washington, D.C. over the last 50 years, and this has been done by both leaderships on both sides, is going to be very problematic for our democracy and our republic, because a lot of shenanigans are going to happen. A lot of partisan politics are going to take over. And at the end of the day, when you start seeing, we're talking to some people who are involved in the 2008 post-crisis, and it's a different situation, but how they hammered out the deal resulted in things like the corn husker kickback and all these special deals that were struck. That Congress right now has a credibility issue, and the cynicism of America during this crisis is only going to have gasoline poured on it if that's the kind of product that comes out of DC. Thank God up to this point in time, it's been pretty bipartisan. It's been pretty isolated from that time, though you see little examples of it. But my hope is demand your leaders to do it. Demand folks to have their folks participate in an open congressman or open debate. And let's just keep going and say, well, this is not the type of leadership we want any longer.
How about the view from the Senate, Senators Collins and Cassidy? We've talked a lot about the four corners that seem to have taken all the air out of the room to some extent as we've moved through these early phases of providing legislative support. What's your views on this, and how can the Problem Solvers Caucus and the bicameral coalition with senators help drive a louder voice of the rank and file?
Susan, you want to go first?
Sure. Well, when the CARES Act, which was the third coronavirus bill, was formulated, it actually was pretty bipartisan. What we did is break down into different groups. I was part of the Small Business Task Force with Marco Rubio, a Republican, Ben Cardin, a Democrat, Jeanne Shaheen, a Democrat. I think what we have in common is we were all really focused on getting an answer, and we came up, led by Marco and myself, with the Paycheck Protection Program, which is a forgivable loan program to encourage small businesses to issue paychecks to their employees, regardless of whether they've been furloughed or laid off, but keep that connection between a small business and its workforce, so that when the economy does rebound, we can have a quick snapback, and we haven't severed that connection, that all-important connection between the employer and the employee. And the four of us, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, worked out the details of that plan. And I'm not saying it was perfect, and we did it fast, but it really has been helpful. And in my state, it's meant that more than 16,000 small employers have been able to access $2.3 billion worth of loans that are supporting paychecks for about 180,000 Mainers. So I think it was a great example of where you get 4 people of goodwill in a room. We met day and night, and I mean that literally, and forged together a package. There was also a tax group that worked together. There was a banking committee group that worked together, a commerce committee group that worked together on issues like how to treat the airlines. And I think the package was not bad. I mean, there was, you can quibble with parts of it, but I think it was pretty good. And I think it was good because we did work together. Now, what was annoying and frustrating to me is when we tried to bring it to the floor, it was delayed by several days for partisan reasons. And that's what we've just got to get rid of. I mean, when we're in the midst of a pandemic, we simply cannot allow partisan politics to delay solutions for the American people. But eventually, the bill was passed unanimously in the Senate. And when you think of a $2.3 trillion bill passing unanimously, I think that shows that we did work together. Now, I will readily concede that that is the exception to the rule. And I agree with my colleague, Bill Cassidy, that there are too many bills that are drafted just at the leadership level, maybe with a little input from the administration, and do not have enough rank and file input. But that was not the case with the CARES Act. And I think the result was we got better legislation because of it. Not perfect, but better.
Senator?
So you asked specifically about the four corners, and so my frustration boiled over at the last spending bill. The last spending bill went through that process I described earlier. It gets passed out on a Monday night. We have to vote on Thursday, or else everybody is, unemployed. All the government workers are unemployed for Christmas. We repealed $500 billion in revenue to the federal government that we never debated in Senate Finance Committee. Let that sink in. Never debated. We repealed $500 billion in revenue. Now I say that because that shows you the power that accrues to the four who are the four corners. And there is a certain kind of dynamic which favors somebody who wishes to repeal $500 billion in tax revenue, who wishes that for that repeal to occur if they're not sure they can get it through a normal debate process. So Maggie Hassan from New Hampshire, James Langford from Oklahoma have a bill called the Prevent Government Shutdown Act. Spending would never stop. You couldn't shut down the government. It would just continue at previous levels, growing by rate of inflation. You couldn't work on anything else. You couldn't appoint judges. Unless it's a national emergency, you got to just wait and stay there. Senators would not be allowed to travel, nor representatives. You'd have to stay in DC. So you would miss Christmas, but everybody would maintain their employment. I actually think that is a way to pull back from that sort of dynamic that's created that coerces people into passing legislation which has not been debated. It's not the only solution, but I think it begins to be a solution.
Thanks, Senator. I know everyone at home on this call tonight is concerned about the future. Where do we go from here? We've talked about briefly what this reopening plan looks like. But let's look forward here, and let me turn to you, Congressman Gottheimer. What are your thoughts about what the next steps look like? What can we expect out of Congress? Can we expect this renewed interest in bipartisanship, as evidenced by the vote that Senator Collins referenced on the CARES Act? Can we expect that to continue, or will people return to their sides? What should we be looking for as signs that we're making progress and that Congress is making progress and working together?
Well, I think what Susan said is exactly right. It was remarkable that every step of the way here, including the CARES Act, but also but for one or two last week's legislation extending more resources to the CARES Act, and the first two packages were all bipartisan and unanimous. And a group of us, problem solvers, half Democrat, half Republican, were in the Situation Room the first day that Dr. Birx flew in to the United States from her post in Africa where she was serving, and with the vice president in the Situation Room to stress one point, that our response to the virus has to remain bipartisan, and the only way to beat this is if we put country first and ahead of party and ahead of most of the squabbling that too often, unfortunately, keeps us from getting things done. And what Senator Cassidy was talking about of just how successful we've been able to move when we get things, when we work together. So here's where I'm optimistic, but I'll be realistic. I think this next package is going to be tough. I think it's not going to be smooth sailing in the same way that the last ones were compared to most of our business these days. And here's the good news. One, you've got a group of us who continues to believe that we've got to work together, even through our differences, to get this done. The country, our economy, our health and safety depend on it. Two, there's going to be probably some disagreements around, you've probably seen them in public, around state and local funding and getting money to municipalities and all the smaller municipalities, and of course to the states that have been hardest hit. I'm in New Jersey. Between New York and New Jersey, we've got half the caseload. And in my district, we've had nearly 30,000 people affected, and we've lost more than 1,700 lives. It's in just my district. So it's awful. And we see what's happening in our nursing homes and our long-term care facilities, as well, where the latest outbreaks have really been in recent 10 days to 2 weeks. So and between what we presented in our plan that Susie so artfully captured, our back to work checklist, we've really, whether it comes to the testing, which has to get more ubiquitous and more rapid, to being prepared and having our infrastructure ready when it comes to our protective gear, for our frontline healthcare workers, for our first responders, and for our workers that we need to get back to work. We're going to need that. We need to make sure our hospitals are prepared if there's another outbreak. Our supply chain is fortified. We start producing those needles and syringes for our vaccine, but also that we do everything we can if we do have another outbreak, so we are in shape as a country. So there's a lot to do in this next piece of legislation to be ready for, put aside whether or not the stimulus side of things versus the rescue and recovery side of things will be ready, whether that's infrastructure or other things that I believe you can get strong bipartisan support for. And the president has indicated that we have that he's interested in also supporting. So it will be tough, but we will get there. And I know this group especially will be leading the way to help get there. And we've got a lot of the right reasonable people here. The Problem Solvers Caucus will be involved with leadership and working closely also with the administration to try to get there.
Thank you, Josh. I'm going to ask something that is near impossible. I'm going to ask each of our Congress people to, in 30 seconds or less, give us your parting words. And Congresswoman Lee, let me turn to you first.
30 seconds, okay. Listen, I think that we are seeing an unprecedented crisis in this country. This country has been met time and again with crisis, and we've evolved and had some major shifts in how we deal with them. And I think that this is an opportunity for the problem solvers to show our leadership and our bipartisanship, and to lead on these packages in response, and not just in response to this pandemic, but hopefully to begin to open the door and set the leadership for more bipartisanship as we address other issues coming out of this pandemic. So I think that, as you all know, I love being part of the problem solvers, but I think we have a crisis is an opportunity as well. We have a big opportunity to use our leadership and our bipartisanship to lead the way for more reforms in Congress as we move forward.
Thank you, Susie. Senator Collins.
I would say that if a pandemic of this magnitude, the worst in more than 100 years in our country, cannot cause us to put aside the too prevalent instinct in Washington to score political points and work together for the good of the country, both on the health side and the economic side, then woe to us. And my final words are to just thank all of you for caring enough to try to get us the support to be in that space. Because if this doesn't call out the best of us, the best in us to work together, I really worry for our country, and I mean that.
Thank you, Senator. Congressman Reed. You're not on, Tom. There you go.
Okay, there we go. So I'm down to 20 seconds. Let me just say this. It's going to take all of us, grassroots effort. We need you to use the power of social media. We've seen it change our history in a short time of existence. Network with your friends. Support us in the Problem Solvers Caucus. We've already changed the rules of the House in our Break the Gridlock package, so we showed that it can be done as a group of members committed to it. And if you get us the social media platforms, you get the grassroots, I will tell you, we can accomplish what we need to do to change the institution for the good. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Senator Cassidy.
John Boehner used to say that the House of Representatives reflects the American people. If there's polarization in the Congress, that's because there's polarization in society. And people speak about gerrymandering in the House of Representatives, but the Senate is not gerrymandered, and there's polarity there. So I would argue it's incumbent upon us all to attempt to treat one another with civility and respect, and for you to demand that of your elected officials, and for the elected officials to realize not just an internal, this is who I am, but also a kind of respect of the community, because there is civility extended. Once you restore civility, I think you're more likely to start seeing less hostility, therefore maybe more bipartisanship. It's our mutual responsibility, all these on the call, including the elected officials, but probably more particularly the people who elect us. So thank you,
Senator. Congressman Gottheimer, why don't you finish us off?
I would just say, to build on what Susan and Bill said, this is a very tough time in our country's history, but we're always best during these moments, and it would be a shame, as Susan said, not to actually come together as a country now in this moment, as we have been, but not to continue that. And you are the group out there that is demanding that we do so as a Congress, as a leadership, and it's up to us to answer that call. We obviously are very committed to it, but I think we've seen that it's much better when we come together. Isn't it a pleasure not to see people screaming at each other on cable news every day? This last month, as tough as it's been and as heart-wrenching as it's been, at least the country has come together to defeat the virus and to show that we're our best when we do that. So that's my ask. Let's continue this spirit and take on with every challenge that we have in front of us. So thank you, No Labels, and thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Josh. Senators, Congressman, thank you for all of your work, for your commitment to bipartisan problem solving. For all of you on the phone, there is reason for hope. There are reasonable people in Washington. There are reasonable elected officials who want to work together to solve these problems for the good of the country. So don't give up hope. Stay engaged. If your congressman, if your member of the House, if your senator is not involved with us, call them up and ask them why not, and stay with us. Let me now turn it over to my colleague, Ryan Clancy. Ryan?
Thank you very much, Andy. Miles Krieger, one of our citizen supporters. Miles, are you on?
Yes, I am.
We do have a few members here, and we want to be mindful of your time, but we also, just before we close, Miles Krieger is one of our citizen supporters. We wanted to give Miles a chance to ask a question because we challenged all of our citizens to do something Congressman Reed said, which is get out there, recruit your friends and family. Miles recruited the most people of any person to get on this call. So we wanted to give him a chance to ask a question of all of you before. Yes, round of applause for Miles. He has a very quick question. We was hoping you could just field these last 5 minutes we have here. Miles, go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm a physician in South Florida. The COVID-19 crisis has many of us wondering what we could do differently to better plan for the future. I suggest the creation of a new cabinet-level position, the Secretary of the Next Generation. This position could be filled by a scientist, futurist, or economist, and it would involve looking at the long-term implications of all the actions that we take or do not take, whether it be in climate change, national debt, equality of opportunity, pandemic protection, urban sprawl, nutrition, etc. This position would be non-political, as the Department of Justice is supposed to be. This is our children and grandchildren of the future being represented at the table of now. We see too much of government based on short-term tactics to get reelected rather than long-term strategies to build out our vision. May I have your bipartisan support to create the secretary of the next generation.
Shall I start?
Yes, thank you, Senator.
Miles, first of all, what an intriguing idea. It strikes me that oftentimes we don't learn from the catastrophic events in our history. I remember after Hurricane Katrina, Joe Lieberman and I, who were the best of friends and still are, did oversight on how spectacularly FEMA failed. And we did lots of reforms, and I think we made a difference. But when I look at FEMA's role today in distributing personal protective equipment, it's not what I would like to see it be. We passed BARDA, we passed all these laws and to get ready for a biological attack on the federal government. My point is that we're always looking back. And it's important to look back and learn from the lessons of the catastrophes, but we don't look forward and try to envision what could happen. There were some examples where we did do tabletop exercises in the intelligence community to look at pandemics, et cetera. But in general, we don't look forward. So I'm intrigued by your idea. I don't know whether it should be cabinet level, but I do think that we need someone who is trying to look at the future as well as learn from the mistakes that we've made in the past. So thank you for that idea.
Thank you so much, Senator Collins. And by the way, Miles, I'm looking at the comment feed here. You actually got nominated by a couple of people to fill this job, should it be created. So I hope your calendar is filled. Well, listen, we have kept the members an hour here in the evening. Go ahead.
Can I just offer, I know everyone's busy.
Go ahead,
but
Congressman.
Miles, your point very much resonated with me. And as I'm a fan of history, it is in our times of most peril of our nation's past that the leaders that establish the vision for tomorrow come to the forefront. And I haven't given up faith in the American people. I haven't given up. The power of the American nation is not by its government, but in its people. And the people on this call represent it best, in my humble opinion. And so I hope this crisis, and I hope the division and the polarization that we have in Washington, D.C. right now will create that environment that I think is coming to a head. And that is going to be producing those next generation of leaders, as well as the leaders of today, that are going to, do exactly what you ask of a cabinet position. And that is to step forward, set the vision for the future of America, and then hand it off to that next generation a little bit better off, like we've done generations before. So I applaud you for that vision. I nominate you. If you want to serve in that capacity, come work for me. I'd love to have you on the staff, or maybe I'll be working for you soon when you're the next great president of the United States. So thanks, Miles, for your thoughts.
Thank you, Congressman. And those are some great closing words to leave our group with. And thank you all so much for your time tonight. Before we leave, a lot of you in the comment feed have been asking a great question. What do I do? How do I help? And we have a couple thoughts about that before we let you go. Two in particular. So this is a Zoom call we're doing here from all of you. What a lot of you might know is that No Labels actually hosts Zoom calls just for House problem solvers and senators, as well as other House members, every single Friday. And these calls are very specific. They are working calls. There's not another forum like it where you get bipartisan members from both parties talking. They talk about very specific issues. So this Friday, you know, this issue of state and local aid is very much going to be on the table. They'll be talking through some of the particulars of that. So one thing we want you to do, and you'll have instructions on the website and through our field team to do it, is to get your member in the Zoom. It's part of our Get in the Zoom campaign. Those of you who've been with us for a while know we had a Get in the Room campaign for a while because we were doing these meetings live. Now we're doing it remotely. Get in the Zoom. Very simple ask. Start pressuring your members every Friday. Get in the Zoom with your colleagues. Try to solve the problems that matter right now. So that's ask number one. Ask number two is we just want to ask all of you to take 20 minutes every week to spend some time reaching out to friends, family, get them involved in the No Labels movement. And one of the things we've heard a lot from all of you is you inevitably will run into some cynicism and some skepticism. And what I would invite you to do is to say, for those on the fence, just tell them to join one of these calls. You know, we have another one of these calls with the members coming up in mid-May. Each week, we actually do a call for just citizens. We've actually been doing them daily. We'll be moving them to weekly next week, where we bring on sometimes members of Congress, sometimes it's public health experts, sometimes it's economists. Really a great opportunity for you to get educated. So take that 20 minutes every week to just try to bring more and more people in, because as Congressman Reed described, that is the strength of this movement. The more numbers we get in, the louder our voice is, the more Washington and its leaders has to listen to us. So thank you so much for joining us all tonight. Everybody stay safe. And if you have any questions about how you can get engaged, just come through our website, email Dan on our field team, dan@nolabels.org, and we'll tell you how you can get going. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.